Okay, good afternoon. I will call the meeting to order. It's 1:31 or 2 p.m. on Tuesday, October 13th, 2024. We have a quorum present with all three commissioners present here in the Concourse Theater Suite C50 of the Will Rogers Memorial Office Building. Notice of the meeting is appropriate. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, and we'll turn it to the 24-hour agenda items. So Mr. Secretary, if you would read the orders that we have today.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioners, before you today are two 24-hour proposed orders. Those are in case numbers PUD 2024-34, and that is a final order canceling certificate of convenience and necessity. The second item is for PUD 2024-41. That is a final order granting withdrawal of certificates of convenience and necessity and cancellation of tariffs.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, seeing no questions, will you please call the roll for a vote?
Commissioner David?
Aye.
Commissioner Anthony?
Again,
Commissioner Anthony?
I'll go last.
Okay, yes, sir. Commissioner Hyatt?
Aye.
Commissioner Anthony?
Aye.
Okay, agenda item number 3 is the PUD 2023-000086. It's the PSO rate case. What I'm doing is I am asking my colleagues to move this case to an ALJ for a hearing instead of being heard en banc. My proposal is to keep the same procedural schedule, but this does allow the ALJ report to happen and an opportunity for exceptions. So, the commission has a lot going on at the moment. So I feel like this is probably the best way to keep this case moving forward. We have a great ALJ staff. So my request is that we let them use their expertise. So there are 2 orders before us that my office prepared. The first one is an order referring the case to an ALJ, and then the second is the amended preliminary order. I provided both of these copies to the offices already. So before we vote on these, I'd just like to ask if anybody has any questions.
May I make a comment? I initially voted against these being advanced to the commission in bank. And I believe that what this essentially does is let the administrative law judge continue as the chairman has just explained. I think it's well thought out. I do support the position the chairman has announced. And I'm sure there's a few details to be worked out, but I would support the proposed orders.
Okay, thank you.
No questions. I have both orders and I'm in support.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll vote on the first item, which is item A, which is the order referring the case to an ALJ. If the secretary will please call the roll on that.
Commissioner David?
Aye.
Commissioner Hyatt?
Aye.
Commissioner Anthony?
Aye.
Next, we'll vote on the item B, which is the second amended preliminary order. If you'll call the roll on that, please.
Commissioner David?
Aye.
Commissioner Hyatt?
Aye.
Commissioner Anthony?
Aye.
Okay, agenda item number 4 is the PSO NOLC case. We have 3 items under this agenda item, and the first one is to receive the status update on the data requests. If Mr. Tillotson would please come forward and give us that.
Thank you, Chairman. Kenneth Tillotson on behalf of Public Service Company of Oklahoma. I can report on the status of PSO responding to the order regarding the objections to the OIEC discovery that PSO staff has worked diligently and efficiently, I believe, and some of the items have been produced as of this morning, and we expect that the remaining items will be produced by the deadline tomorrow. So there should not be any delay, and we're not requesting additional relief to respond further.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions regarding this?
No questions.
Thank you. And then the next two items that we have under this are very similar to what we did on the prior agenda item, which is moving the NOLC case to an ALJ for a hearing. I am proposing to keep, once again, proposing to keep the same procedural schedule, but this allows an ALJ report and an opportunity for exceptions. So there's two orders, once again, that my office prepared and sent to everyone. The first one is referring the case to the ALJ, and the second one's the amended order granting motion for procedural schedule. So if there are no questions,
I have no questions, in support of both.
okay, will the secretary please call the roll on item A, which is the first order?
Commissioner David,
Aye.
Commissioner Hyatt,
Aye.
Commissioner Anthony.
Aye.
If you'll please call the roll on the second order, which is the one granting motion for procedural schedule.
Commissioner David,
Aye.
Commissioner Hyatt,
Aye.
Commissioner Anthony.
Aye.
Point of clarification, I think the first vote was on item B.
I'm sorry, what? Can you repeat that?
The first vote was on item B.
In what Roman numeral?
4,
We're under 4.
4B instead of 4A.
Oh, you're correct. So yes, it was item B and item C. So thank you.
I accept the correction. Thank you.
Okay. Moving to agenda item 5. Which is the proration case. It's CD 2024-001745. So if Mr. Trout could come and give us an update.
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. Good afternoon. My name is Tyler Trout, and I'm the attorney representing the Oil and Gas Conservation Division in this case, which seeks to establish the proration formula to be used in determining allowable production from unallocated gas wells for the period of October 1st, 2024 through September 30th, 2025. There are sign-in sheets on the lecterns for those present in the courtroom. For those who are participating remotely and would like to be included on the sign-in sheet, you may email your contact information to Julianne Alexander. Her email address is julianne.alexander@occ.ok.gov. And if anyone would like to make comments, please identify yourself and who you represent. And if you're present in the courtroom, please come up and use the microphone when you speak. The application and notice of hearing filed in this case were sent by electronic mail through the Commission's Gov Delivery Service on June 21st, 2024. And the notice of hearing was published on June 26th in the Journal Record and Tulsa World newspapers. A public technical conference took place at 10 a.m. on July 23rd to afford interested persons an opportunity to present comments. Several comments were made during the technical conference, and several comments have been filed in this case. And then a second notice of hearing was filed on July 19th, in addition to staff's recommendations for the next proration period. The second notice of hearing and staff's recommendations were sent by electronic mail through the Commission's Gov Delivery Service on July 19th. And the second notice of hearing was published on July 25th in the Journal Record and Tulsa World newspapers. And then a memorandum was prepared by Duncan Woodliff containing staff's recommendations for the next proration period and was filed in this case on August 9th. And Commissioners, unless there's anything you would like to address at this time, I have one witness to be sworn in.
Have any questions?
No questions.
Okay, well, Ms. Trout, if you'd call your witness.
Commissioner David,
Oh,
would
sorry,
you
you're
swear in the witness, please?
Before we go ahead, Mr. Woodliff, would you please raise your right hand? Do you affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, now you'll continue, please.
All right, thank you. Mr. Woodliff, would you please state your name for the record?
Duncan Woodliff.
And where are you employed and what is your job title?
Okay, I'm a manager of production of proration in the Oil and Gas Conservation Division of the Oklahoma Corporation Commission.
And what are some of your duties as manager of production and proration?
Well, it would be managing all aspects of oil and gas well allowables, testing, proration procedures, and just general monitoring of production statistics and allowable rules, and watching for compliance as well.
And have you previously testified before the commission?
I have, yes.
Do you know approximately how many of these proration hearings you have testified in up to this point?
Probably dozens by now. You know, it's goes back into the 1990s.
Okay, and would you just briefly describe your education and employment history for the commissioners?
Okay, yes, I graduated with a degree in geology from Western Michigan University, and after that, I went and headed to Oklahoma and got a job here at the Corporation Commission, and I've been here for about 43 years now.
Look closer.
Oh, sorry. Do I need to repeat that, or?
Did you hear him?
I could hear him. I don't know if anybody online, but we
You're
could hear
okay.
him.
Okay.
Okay. And commissioners, I would request that Mr. Woodliff's qualifications be accepted and retained in this case.
I'm good with that.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Woodliff, are you familiar with this case?
Yes, I am.
And did you prepare a memorandum containing staff's recommendations that was filed in this case on August 9th?
Yes, I did.
And what are staff's recommendations for the next proration period?
Okay, would be the greater of 75% of the wellhead absolute open flow potential, or 3,000 MCF per day. And that would be from the period of October 1st, 2024 through September 30th of 2025.
And that is the same recommendation from the prior proration period.
That's
is
correct.
that
It's
correct?
continuation of the present rate.
Okay, and would you explain for the commissioners the reasons for making those recommendations?
Okay, well, kind of suddenly, this ended up being a pretty polarized situation where there
Go
were.
ahead and pull that microphone once again closer to you. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, it was just polarized, that came up quickly on this. And we evaluated a lot of this, and there didn't seem to be any one change of condition which brought this on or anything. So we considered it, and we perceived that the greater threat was the problem that it may enhance Oklahoma's reputation as unfriendly environment for oil and gas activity. And we felt that that was a more tangible problem than any kind of supply-demand issue that might be on there. Because having a reduction of proration, that would cause issues right there. And the production in the scheme of things, trying to establish a formation on there, any kind of formula, would not have a negative, would have a negligible effect in the scheme of things as far as that goes. So we felt that the problems of supply demand imbalance are not going to be solved by that. Some of the existing rules and the regulations are already ingrained, and therefore outside the scope of the proration formula. For instance, horizontally spaced units, those already get a separate allowable anyway. We got, casing head gas from oil wells, which take up a large percentage of what is being produced, and they are exempt from the rules, regulations of unallocated wells, and therefore not subject to the formula here. And so in view of things, especially what's being espoused here is a halving of the permitted production rate to 37.5%, 1,500. One case even more than that is going to have a pretty extreme effect on having a perception that this regulatory uncertainty. And so we felt that, that would be best just to leave things as they are and let both sides demonstrate what they need to.
Okay, and Mr. Woodliff, did you consider all of the written comments filed in this case and all of the comments that were presented at the public technical conference when preparing staff's recommendations?
Yes.
Commissioners, I don't believe I have any further questions for Mr. Woodliff at this time, and I would request that a final opportunity be given for public comments.
At the risk of repeating, you mentioned that you've made a filing Is it your knowledge that a proposed order has been prepared to put forth your recommendations, the recommendation of staff?
Yes, I don't know if it's been prepared or not. I mean, that's just what we're recommending at this stage.
Commissioner Anthony, I did prepare a proposed order and I sent that to the aides and so they do have the proposed order.
I did just want to establish that. You said you've been doing this for 40 some years.
I don't know if it's been that long. I've been here for over 40 years, probably I would say about 20, 25 years I've been doing this.
Well, let's say the last 2 or 3 decades when I've been here too. Would you characterize my position as largely being to support staff's position?
Yes, I would assume that.
That's my recollection also. And we discussed this matter at our previous meeting. And I made a few comments there, and I stick with those at this time. Nothing further.
I guess we can open the floor for public comment.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Is there anyone online who would like to make public comment?
No, Commissioner, there's no public comment online.
Okay. And there is a draft order that has been submitted by staff. So what is the will of my fellow
I
commissioners?
think we may.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please come forward and just state your name and who you're with, please.
Hi, I'm Chad McDougall. I was just waiting to see if anybody was online. I didn't want to steal the floor. I'm with JMA Energy Company here in Oklahoma City. I want to be clear at the outset, I'm also the chairman of the Petroleum Alliance, but the opinions I'm espousing are that of my company and not the Petroleum Alliance. It doesn't have a position in these hearings because there's multiple parties and companies involved. I have provided a supplemental statement. I don't know if you all have that in front of you. I'm happy to provide you a copy of that. There's some slides with that I can refer to. It's a submission number 27. I don't know if it's a digital or a paper setup, but in our prior comments, we made it clear that we believe that a decision to make no change by the commission is just not a decision that would embrace the facts in circumstances here. Unfortunately, the technical staff has done just that. They've recommended no change. Every signal in the facts and data that we look at, signals that there is a change needed. When we see recommendations about a lighter staff workload and items outside the scope of the statute, and ignoring the facts and data, it's disappointing. We believe this decision is critical to Oklahoma's citizens, and Oklahoma's oil and gas industry and its natural gas producers. Failure to make a change here would be viewed by some as a lack of support for that industry. I mean, I can't underline it enough how critical the situation is for the oil and natural gas producers in the state. I mean, I know that Mr. Woodliff's been doing this a long time, but we're at a situation where we're seeing prices that are the lowest they've been in almost 35 years, almost longer than Mr. Woodliff's been here. So I understand wanting to have a stable environment, but just like we react to situations of emergency and we raise the levels, we need to likewise react similarly to situations like we're in now and change the levels. Doing nothing's not an answer. The technical staff recommended keeping the 3,000 and 75% of open flow, but yet they acknowledge that it reflects a level that wells can't even produce. An allowable is not an unattainable level. That'd be like saying we're gonna have a speed limit that's 150 miles an hour. We have a speed limit. Nobody's gonna break it. And in the comments from staff, they recognize, in essence, what they're saying is that this is produce whatever you can produce. There really is no limit. But in those same statements, they say 100% of open flow, in essence, just producing the well of the atmosphere would be waste. That's a distinction without a difference. There needs to be an allowable in this situation that would actually be something that the well could feel. That's what an allowable is. When you're producing your well and you find that level and you go, okay, there's my allowable. The staff discusses a dramatic drop in the number of Form 1016 filings as a change in the rules. I don't view that as a positive. What that says is that the minimum well allowable is so high that very few wells have to submit. That does create a lighter workload, but that's less actual regulation of the production to keep it at a healthy level. And what we see is in the slides that I gave you is that higher allowables haven't grown production. Oklahoma had 120% growth in its production over 20 years when it was at 2 million a day and 65% of open flow. The COVID pandemic happened. We've gone to this 3 million a day and 75%, and we're not growing production. So these concerns about that having the higher allowable is going to help us grow market share is not well placed. It's not helping. We had a more stable environment when we were at 2 million a day and 65% than where we are now. There's comments in here about fears of regulatory instability and potentially causing disincentives to invest within the state and ultimately having an adverse effect on Oklahoma's national market share. That's a quote. This isn't borne out by the facts. When those things aren't part of the statute about preventing waste and public interest. And in fact, when you look at the next slide in the statement I gave you, the rig count has declined with a higher allowable. So production's not growing, rigs aren't growing, activity's not growing. The thesis is higher allowables will incentivize investment. That's not what's happening. Now, I understand that price is not supposed to be part of this. It's about preventing waste and public interest. But you have to look at price like it's a barometer or a thermometer of supply and demand. I mean, it tells you more than anything what is going on in the balance of supply and demand in the market. And what you see is that the price that we're at now says the market is grossly oversupplied. In the state of Texas, they're selling gas for negative. I mean, I guess we should be thankful we're selling it for $1.60 in Oklahoma, which is really a sub-operating standard. I don't know if everybody fully fathoms what we're talking about here. You've got a lot of producers across the state. If you're a gas-only producer, these levels are not sustainable. And to say no change is okay is not okay. That's just ignoring it. That's just turning your head away and leaving them to flounder. As I said before, the commission has shown the ability to make changes. If you look at the previous history, when you go back into the early 90s, the commission was very nimble. They would make changes on a quarterly basis, sometimes 6 months. They would be very responsive to what was going on. And then in 1999, they raised the allowable to 2 million a day and 65%. And you can see during that period, we had stronger gas prices, a vibrant market. We grew production in Oklahoma. And really, there wasn't a change necessary. The industry was healthy. But that started to change. And then we had the COVID pandemic. And this response of trying to raise allowables, why I understand why it was done, it's not working. The experiment failed. It's time to make a change. And I think that the commission needs to follow on and be just as nimble as they have in the past. And so when I see recommendations that say, let's look at it every year because that's too often. I mean, the oil and gas industry pays billions of dollars of gross production tax into the state, part of which funds the Corporation Commission. Everybody here has something to do. And they should be able to look at those filings and get them done. They've done them before. They've done them in shorter periods before. We've had a greater numbers of 1016s. They can be done. There's some questions in the last hearing about excesses of natural gas and concerns about gas storage. Understand that what we're talking about was trying to get the natural gas storage back towards the 5-year average, kind of the normal operating range. There's no danger of running out of gas in Oklahoma, of the customers running out of gas in Oklahoma. In fact, you want to make a healthy market so there's a healthy supply of gas for the customers in Oklahoma. Also, there were some concerns about LNG and being able to provide LNG to our operating partners in the world and allies. We can deliver all the LNG we need to. Right now, the U.S. is delivering 12 to 15 BCF a day, and if there were more facilities, we'd deliver more. That's not an issue. We're not going to run out of gas for LNG. We've got plenty of gas. And in fact, you see that even more when we have a ruffle from a hurricane or a storm that shuts these plants down, and suddenly it shocks the market because all the gas backs up in the system. We have to be responsive to what's going on. As I covered in my prior statement, we're at a record glut of storage. The basis in Oklahoma is now negative 25%, which is the difference between the Henry Hub price and our price. That basis has doubled in the last year. It's fourfold since 2023. Those are all big red lights flashing at you saying, the market's out of balance, do something. Doing nothing's not an answer. I know it's the easy answer, but this is not an easy subject. And you've got an industry who's, really, they're relying on you. And so is the state. Gross production taxes were down $700 million for the fiscal year we just ended, down 40%. And they're going to go lower in the next fiscal year. The citizens of Oklahoma rely on that money from the gross production tax collections to fund lots of other things. So it does affect the citizens of the state. The Corporation Commission needs to take action. Now, I provided a graph in here with price, and I showed you, I outlined, it's on page 4. I showed you what a 1.5 million a day minimum allowable would look like. Interestingly, it falls right about where the prices were back in the lows of 91 and 95 and where we are now. I know that seems low, but I think it's responsive. Leaving it at 3 million a day is not responsive. So with that, I would close and say that JMA would ask that the commissioners would agree to a 37.5% of open flow and a 1.5 million a day minimum well allowable. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
No questions?
What percent of Oklahoma produced gas is now exported outside the state? You know that number roughly?
Well, one thing about Oklahoma is all our pipes basically point outbound. We don't, one of the things we've seen before is we don't really have inbound pipes for outbound. I think the production right now is 7.5 BCF a day, and probably, I don't know the exact number, but probably more than half that's exported. I could get it for you, but I don't know right off the top of my head, but it's a fair amount, obviously.
I knew it was a fair amount. As a matter of fact, I think
your microphone's off, sir. Sorry.
At times it's reached as high as close to 70%.
Right.
So you're thinking it's closer to 50-60%?
I don't know the exact number, and I think you might be right, but that's not a number I studied.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Stephen Morris. I'm a senior land professional at Marathon Oil Company, and I will be making comments on behalf of Tom Hellman, Vice President of our Oklahoma and Northern Delaware assets. I will be reading a prepared and filed statement in the matter. Honorable Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the statewide proration formula for unallocated gas wells for the next proration period of October 1st, 2024 through September 30th, 2025. As stated in the technical conference on July 23rd, Marathon Oil respectfully requests that the Commission allow operators to produce gas wells at 100% of the absolute open flow potential of the well for a period of 1 year.
Could you get closer?
Based on discussion at the technical conference, we believe it is important to note that the U.S. electricity load growth forecast has increased approximately 80% over the next 5 years, according to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Natural gas is the cleanest, most reliable, and readily available resource to meet this need. Marathon Oil operates in 4 major domestic resource basins, and each competes for capital based on project economics. Limiting natural gas production will increase regulatory uncertainty and disadvantage Oklahoma. Sincerely, Tom Hellman. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Will Hauser. I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs for Continental Resources. And we're actually, Mr. Woodruff,
Yeah, get
had
closer,
wanted
please.
to go lower than what JMA had recommended. Our initial ask was that we reduce the well's open flow potential to 35% or 1,000 MCF a day. Of course, that was before we saw the final recommendation. And so our initial filing, we spoke to what we see as some of the problems with this question of regulatory uncertainty and market demand. Market demand has many factors. Regulatory uncertainty is very low on that list. The real driving force behind market demand and production and rig count in Oklahoma is going to be the oil price and the break-even price of an oil well. That's what drives capital to this basin. We would agree with earlier comments about higher allowables encouraging greater investment in production in the state. It just hasn't been proven. We've seen about 3 to 4 years of basically no restriction on production, and we're not seeing any increase in production. We also would emphasize that the statute is a conservation statute meant to prevent waste. It's not a price control statute. It's asserting that the current high rate it allows for excessive production, which puts us in a vicious cycle: overproduction, oversupply, low price. And some of the public comments have even mentioned that if they can't get their price, they'll get their volume. Well, the only way, and so what they're telling you is they'll produce as much as they have to get their rate of return. That's not the purpose of the conservation statute. We don't believe it's the purpose of the commission. So in our most recent statement, we would recommend that obviously we got a strong indication that the commission's going to think our initial recommendation is too restrictive. So we would recommend going back to the 65% or 2,000 MCF a day. This was in place from April of 1999 to October of 2019. It's a period of historical success and investment and production growth in the state.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Monica Pickens with Gulfport Energy, Senior Regulatory Analyst. I have a statement to read on behalf of our Regulatory Director, Randy Maxey. Gulfport MidCon, Gulfport Energy appreciates the opportunity to provide comments on the proration formula for the natural gas wells in Oklahoma. As an Oklahoma-based publicly traded exploration and production company, we pride ourselves on being a safe and prudent operator focused on maximizing shareholder value. As a result, Gulfport Energy is opposed to the proposed formula currently open for review before the Oklahoma Corporation Commission that would reduce the allowable in production to 37% of wellhead calculated absolute open flow potential, or 1,500 MCF per day, whichever is greater, or any other overall reduction in allowable volumes to the current formula. To that end, Gulfport Energy alternatively recommends that the agency move to a formula of 100% of the wellhead calculated absolute open flow potential to be in line with other states that value fair market pricing and foster development. This action allows the economics in the open market to control production volumes. Further restricting the flows from Oklahoma will artificially limit the opportunity for Oklahoma companies to compete in the open market, which will lead to reduced investment and reduced jobs. Imposing these restrictions puts Oklahoma producers and the state at a competitive disadvantage relative to our neighboring states. It also limits the investment companies will make in drilling new wells in Oklahoma, as the return on the investment would directly impact the initial production rates through these excessive restrictions on production. Additionally, there will be a negative impact on the state's revenues, for instance, from decreased production tax revenues. Gulfport Energy itself, in this scenario, stands to lose approximately $50 to $60 million in oil and gas revenue associated with this, with having to curtail our gas volumes. Moreover, many Oklahoma mineral owners and landowners will see reduced royalty payments from the decrease in the natural gas production. All of this will have a negative impact on the state, local operators, and ultimately Oklahomans. Furthermore, Gulfport Energy, along with other Oklahoma operators, have long-term contractual agreements, often with minimum volume commitments. Implementing rules that severely reduce production allocation limits the Oklahoma oil and gas producers' ability to deliver their contractual obligations. In addition, short-term notification of such changes, such as contemplated here, put companies like Gulfport Energy in a very difficult situation without being able to plan for such reductions. For example, the proposed reductions to the calculated absolute open flow potential contemplated could have a range of impacts from 20 to 30 million of utilized minimum volume commitments to our business in 2024 to 2025. Midstream companies have deployed significant financial investments to pipeline takeaway within the state, and these contracts make development projects possible. Limiting an operator's production capacity can have a negative impact on these capital-intensive projects, and subsequently will contribute to reduced investment and opportunities within the state. In summary, Gulfport Energy requests that the OCC eliminate the proration formula and allow for 100% of wellhead calculated absolute open flow potential, or at a minimum, leave the current formula for proration in place. We have a duty as a publicly traded company to maximize shareholder value, and the proposed changes to the proration calculations have a direct impact to our business of approximately $70 to $90 million of direct cash flow, which is over 25% of the entire company's budgeted cash flow. These have real impacts on our shareholders, our business partners, and our employees. Regulatory uncertainty is a challenge for Oklahoma's oil and gas producers, and operating in a stable regulatory environment that supports business and further investment in an already challenging economic market is paramount to Oklahoma's oil and gas producers. Again, thank you for the opportunity for us to offer our comments this matter.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Walla, and I'm with Devon Energy. I am the Surface Lane and Regulatory Manager for Devon, and I'm here to express our support for the staff's recommendation of the proration, the no change to the proration at minimum, and also for the 12-month duration. We submitted a letter, and it has commentary in there that supports our findings and the staff's findings. And so from that standpoint, we would encourage you all to accept the staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Grateful for the opportunity to speak with you. My name is Jesse Payne, and I work for Oventive. We're an operator in the state of Oklahoma with employees located in 3 offices in Oklahoma City, Okarche, and Foster. We have an active drilling program. We operate over 1,100 wells, have an interest in an additional 2,000 wells. We submitted a letter on July 19th before the technical conference. Our letter supported the OCC allowing operators to produce gas wells at 100% of the wellhead calculated absolute open flow potential. The decisions the OCC makes on proration are meaningful and impacts where the industry invests in this country. We think the staff's recommendations threads the needle on this, and so Oventive is supportive of the staff's recommendations today. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else would like to come forward and make a public statement? You have any questions or statements?
I would support the commission today approving and issuing the order that has been prepared that reflects the staff's recommendation. I know this isn't a simple matter, but we do need to make a decision, and there are certain deadlines for publishing and posting notice and the business of this agency.
I do think we've had some good arguments over the last couple of months for the lowering. I agree with a couple of the individuals today that have stated previously in our tech conferences that the conservation statute was definitely created with waste in mind. And so I'm very sympathetic to those arguments that would lower that, and I've taken that into great would lower the allowables, and I've taken that into great consideration. But what I keep coming to is what one operator may call waste, the operator down the road may call, that's my ability to meet my creditors' requirements. And so that's, you have, I don't know that there is a good definition that I know of waste in that. And on one side, you would say selling undervalued gas is waste. On the other side, you would say without being able to continue continuity of operations, then we lose our wells and those wells will no longer produce, and maybe that produces waste. So it would produce waste if that were to occur. And so I've had a hard time in my own mind getting clarification as to what waste is. And so I plan to support today the order that has been provided us that would remain at the 75% or 3,000. But I would encourage Mr. Woodruff, you and the division to just continue to give this thought. Obviously, we can adjust this at any time. We don't have to wait till the end of the year. But I would ask the division and Mr. Woodruff in particular just to continue to take those thoughts into consideration as to, what is waste? We certainly, we are statutorily charged with preventing waste. And so to decide to make a decision whether we are creating waste or preventing waste, I think requires that we try to get a handle on what is the definition of waste in this particular circumstance. Thank you.
I do want to thank everybody for the comments that were filed in this case, as well as everyone coming forward today and speaking before the commission. It's really important that we hear every side of this issue. I also have some concerns going forward as we look at the market moving into what will potentially be a huge increase in use of natural gas for electricity. And because that is the other side of what we do, or one of the other sides of what we do here in the commission, I see that as as this nation moves more into green energy, the dependency on natural gas becomes even greater. So I have concerns about lowering any production levels because of that. I also have some concerns about, it looked like when we lowered production levels, then Oklahoma was just that much less competitive compared to other states. So I do want the companies that have come into Oklahoma and made that investment to be able to continue to get the return on their investment. And I'm absolutely sympathetic to the fact that they've made that investment, would like to get that return. So at this time, I'm also inclined to go with staff's recommendation to keep it the same. And I mean, quite frankly, my preference may have been even to increase it. So, but I will absolutely go with staff's recommendation at this time. So I guess we're ready to take a vote on this. So we do have the proposed order, Mr. Secretary. So if you could call roll on a vote for the proposed order from staff.
Commissioner David,
Aye.
Commissioner Hyatt,
Aye.
Commissioner Anthony.
Aye.
Well, the next item on our agenda is for the discussion and nomination possible vote for a commission vice chairman. I held that position previously, as you all are well aware. I'm very honored to have the position of chairman at this time, but I do feel it's necessary that we fill the vice chairmanship position. Does anybody have any discussion on this? Well, then I'll go ahead and make the motion to nominate Commissioner Anthony to serve as vice chair effective 8/14/2024. If you'll please call the roll, Mr. Secretary.
Commissioner David,
Aye.
Commissioner Hyatt.
I will vote no, and I will be issuing a statement after the meeting.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Anthony.
Aye.
Okay, agenda item number 7 is the discussion of the current record retention schedules. Because we've had discussion in the past meetings about what our retention schedule is, and we've had motions in previous meetings about increasing that. I thought it was really important for, I assume it's going to be Trey that's going to come forward and give us an update on that. Trey, if you'd come forward and go through what the retention schedule is for the commission, and also if you can get into possible, like the penalty for non-compliance and whether we're able to retain the digital copies in lieu of physical copies and things like that, if you'd please do that.
Thank you, Commissioner David. Trey Davis, Public Information Office. We have numerous retention schedules within the combined retention schedule for the agency that is set up with the Department of Libraries. It's 205 pages long. A copy of that combined schedule was emailed to all of your offices earlier today, along with the 2-page statement. Encompassed in the concept of retention schedule are these items are public records. So there are a couple of acts that address the retention of public records and how those are retained. This agency began a number of years ago to digitalize its public records so that they could be maintained in a secure server situation, otherwise known as the cloud. And the retention of hard copies largely are destroyed in cooperation with the Department of Libraries into a schedule that they permit once the agency confirms that those records have been digitalized and have been properly secured and preserved. Depending on the type of record that we're talking about, this agency is a little unique in that it is a court of record in the state of Oklahoma. It is distinguished among other agencies in the state partly because of that. And so records that another agency might be able to destroy permanently after 5 or 7 years, the Corporation Commission is required to maintain forever. And so those records, that while the hard copies may be destroyed per the schedule that's approved by the Department of Libraries, the digital copy is always and forever maintained. That is also part of the agency's co-op plan, continuing operations plan, and its business plan. Should something happen to the physical structure where we are located, or to the governing aspect of this body, there are plans in place so that these records are preserved in more than one location to help ensure compliance with this act. As far as penalty, I can look up the penalties. I didn't come prepared to answer that question, Commissioner, but
Throw you a
the agency is in compliance. We work very closely with the Department of Libraries. We have a Teams channel devoted to the preservation of agency records, and that schedule is included in that document that was emailed to your offices earlier today. Because I represent the Office of Public Information, I can also tell you that we are in compliance with the Open Records Act and the retention of documents. Fortunately, through our contract with Deloitte and Touche, which has the program relativity, an individual may delete records from their individual email account, but those records, unlike the recent older days, those documents don't go away. Relativity is able to pull those records, deleted or not, draft or not, into its search. And so, and it is astounding how much relativity is able to produce. I can tell you, we did what seemed like a simple search that returned 1.27 gigabytes of data at an estimated cost of $240,000 and many months to cull through that. So I've asked that reporter if they want to narrow their search because that exceeds our ability to comply with the act as envisioned with that large a return. This agency has a tremendous amount of records, and preserving them is a value with the agency, not a priority. It is a value.
Can you tell us when the last time it was that the policy was updated?
The policy itself was updated in January, I believe, per the schedule that was emailed to your offices earlier. We went through yesterday and updated that combined list, that 205-page document that was sent. So it now bears tomorrow's date. If you look at the first page of the document, it tells you when each part of the disposition schedule was updated. For instance, administration was April of 23. The judicial secretary court clerk was April of 23. It looks like oil and gas was October of 21. And so that is on the first page of that document. But the effort to scan is ongoing. And as those items are digitized, that information is shared with the Department of Library, and we are given then authorization to destroy that next batch of records.
And I'm also looking on here, even just general correspondence in the commission offices, it's 3 years. We keep that just general correspondence before it's destroyed.
Per the schedule. That's standard. OCC is not completely unique to other agencies, but there are some aspects of our day-to-day operation that are consistent with other agencies.
And I only bring this up because I feel like maybe the public has gotten the misperception that we are destroying records and not keeping things for years at a time. And from what you're telling me, any of the court records that for any of the proceedings we have, those are lifetime. And general correspondence even between the commission office with the commission office is 3 years.
It is. If it is a record, though, that it may be deleted, but that doesn't mean relativity can't return it.
Good point.
We had a recent request from a news station for emails from the commissioners, and it returned some items from 2013. Just to give you a perspective of
Okay.
how long those can be retained. So agenda items, for instance, I believe have to be maintained into perpetuity. And so those have been digitalized and are secure for commission meetings.
Have any questions?
To, if I could, Commissioner, to address your specific statement, I can tell you that I do not, and the General Counsel's office does not engage in destroying public records. And I do not believe that anyone within the Office of Public Information has destroyed any records. I think all records are maintained and secure in compliance with the Open Records Act. And we make every effort to be responsive and timely in response to requests for records.
Well, and thank you for that clarification. I think it's important for people to hear that we do everything within our power to make sure that we follow the law and the policy in this and ensure that we keep records, sounds like even longer than what we're required to in some cases. And it kind of goes back to that once they're digitized, you never really delete them anyway. I mean, they're there. So I appreciate that clarification that we're doing everything by the book the way we should do. And I don't believe that has there ever been any action brought against the commission or allegations that we're not doing proper record keeping?
Well, there's certainly been allegations, but I don't know that there have been any actions brought against the commission.
Nothing proven that we've ever deleted things that we were not supposed to delete, or
I don't know that any evidence has ever been submitted along with the allegation to suggest that the agency is not in compliance with the Records Preservation Act or with the Open Records Act.
Could you give us an example of a record that is required by law to be kept in perpetuity?
I believe the commission agendas are required.
Excuse me.
Maintained. I believe the agendas for the commission, its meetings are required to be maintained.
I think the minutes of meetings is.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, the minutes.
Example. Thank you.
okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trey. Agenda item number 8 is on the independent investigator update. We said that we would do a status update on the hiring of an independent investigator to handle the non-criminal complaints regarding allegations of misconduct to be presented by agency personnel. And I believe Pat is here. Is Pat still here? There she is. Pat, could you, I believe last week, well, I don't believe, I know, last week I gave everyone the update on the letter from the Attorney General they sent us that email just before the commission meeting started that they would do all the criminal investigations. So this is not the criminal investigation side. So if you would reiterate that for us and then tell us who it is that has been hired and kind of go into some of the details of that, I'd appreciate it.
Pat Fran's Office of General Counsel. Yes, in looking into the, trying to find a forum for employees to bring any complaints.
Could you get closer?
Bring any complaints of conduct that's non-criminal in nature to supplement what the Attorney General is doing under their criminal jurisdiction. We started out by going through a program that we have here in the state of Oklahoma. We have several trained EEO investigators that have gone through a special program with the state. And people will come to other agencies or employees of agencies. They'll go to other agencies and conduct these type of investigations for free. And it's kind of a reciprocal program where we could send a certified person to another agency. There's a real time constraint on this and that we wanted to get this started as quickly as possible. And we went down a list that was provided by the Civil Service Division at OMES and contacted several, and none between their other workloads and frankly, the nature of the situation and then just personal time planned off for the summer, we just could not get anybody who was able to do it under that program. So there are several law firms in town that have employment law practices, and having this type of investigator is very typical of those type of law firms. The one that we're most familiar with, it was David Lee at Riggs Abney, who passed away last fall. And familiar with his associate there, another shareholder at Riggs Abney, Melvin Hall, reached out to him and discussed what we needed and discussed the scope. And then from there, we submitted those discussions in the form of what's called a 20I form, where you fill out what it is you want to do with the project and scope and various other informations, hourly rates, et cetera, to the Attorney General's office. And they have gone ahead and approved hiring Riggs Abney to do that investigation. And we've gotten a confirmation email from the Attorney General's office at this point, and then we'll get the follow-up formal letter probably within the next day or two. And so there is an attorney in Tulsa that will be assisting him, but the main attorney is Melvin Hall at Riggs Abney, and he is here in town on 12th Street in Oklahoma City. So we'll be making that information available to anybody.
Okay. So once again, we have the Attorney General who has doing the criminal investigative side, and then we have Mr.
Melvin Hall.
And can we post that information on our website or somewhere where if somebody, I mean, how are we getting this information out to the employees and to the public? That if
Well, to the employees, we have several routes. Probably Teams would be the main one that we would use internally. I'm going to have to leave it to Trey, who was up here before me, on how that's going to be. I'm assuming it would go out on the Gov delivery and probably be posted to the website as well.
Great.
Here he comes.
Thank you. Thank you, Trey, for coming up and telling us how we're going to get this information out.
Thank you, Mr. Hall and Ashley in our General Counsel's office will develop an email that will go out to all employees. We will also make that through our Gov Delivery publication, which goes out to, I think, all told around 18,000 email addresses. We can certainly post it to the homepage of the agency website if you think we should do that. We can also provide the information to media outlets.
Okay. I think that would be sufficient on as far as I'm concerned. I know that I've only had one person reach out to me and ask who they would contact. So as long as we have a name and a number and someone that is actively doing this investigation, and we can let them know. I
would point out that our role is completed once the contract is in place and that notification goes out. The agency itself will have no contact with the firm. They will be completely free to conduct their investigation as they see fit, and they will take it where it leads.
Fantastic. Any questions?
Pat, I might raise one issue. First of all, I think very highly of the Riggs Abney firm and David Lee in particular, who's deceased now, but he represented us in the past, and me personally or individually in the past also. I'm acquainted with Melvin Hall. I think that in a lawsuit brought against this agency to include Brandy Reef and the commissioners, that I consider that Melvin Hall has represented me previously. Does that raise any issues for you?
No, it does not.
Excuse me.
No, Commissioner, it doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If we don't have any other questions or comments, I'm going to call it a short health break. We're going to come back at 2:50 to finish the rest of the agenda items. So we'll take a short recess. We'll be back at 2:50. Okay, it is 2:51. We are back on the record with all three commissioners present. And our next agenda item is agenda item number 9. And one thing I want to say, Commissioner Anthony, before I turn it over to you, is that I know that you have filed your own case to conduct your own investigation, and I do want to I hope that you will, on these types of meetings, that you can hold your own meetings at a time and place of your choosing in this courtroom. So I hope that you'll do that. And with that, Commissioner Anthony, I will turn agenda item.
If I could, Madam
Yes.
Chairman, if I could, I'd like to make a statement prior to moving through agenda items number 9 through 12. The agenda items submitted by Commissioner Anthony. As I stated at last week's meetings, I've apologized for my abuse of alcohol, begun treatment. I've stepped aside as chairman of the commission and will continue to cooperate fully with any ongoing personnel investigation being conducted as the General Counsel, Pat Franz, previously described. As someone who has dedicated his life to public service, I firmly believe that all investigations should be fair and follow the law, not be derailed by the raging manifestos of one commissioner with personal vendettas. Sadly, this is not the first time that Commissioner Anthony has placed himself above the proper process of this commission, engaged in frivolous appeals of decisions that didn't go his way, and sought to take down other elected officials when he disagrees with a legitimate outcome of an OCC proceeding. For example, in 2002, former Commissioner Ed Apple issued a formal opinion stating that Commissioner Anthony had been, and I quote Commissioner Ed Apple, flagrant in the misuse of his official powers and has bullied, impugned, and abused members of the OCC staff. Further, his goals have been to punish a regulated company in order to further his personal agenda. And then, if that wasn't enough, in 2010, former Commissioner J.C. Watts was moved to submit comments for the record to the commission because he was so flabbergasted that Commissioner Anthony was attempting to resuscitate a 20-year-old case, a case that Commissioner Anthony had lost despite using his usual tactics of intimidation, unethical research, and attempts to sully Commissioner Watts' good name. History also shows that Commissioner Anthony has a history of not accepting proceeding results when they do not go his way. In 2011, former Attorney General Scott Pruitt determined that Commissioner Anthony was wrong in requesting that the Attorney General reopen a bribery case against former Commissioner Robert Hopkins, saying it would be improper for the commission to expend public funds to hire an expert to reopen said case. Commissioner Anthony has also been told that his request to conduct his own investigations of issues for this commission are not legal. As far back as 2003, former Oklahoma Attorney General Drew Edmondson warned Commissioner Anthony when he attempted to begin a unilateral investigation related to case number PUD 2003-260 that it would be a violation of the law. Edmondson also warned that any funds spent, supplies used, employees' time devoted, or other public resources devoted to that exercise may well constitute misappropriation of public funds, close quote from Drew Edmondson. Commissioner Anthony also has displayed a pattern of overzealously making wild accusations first, without regard for the facts and the reputation of the people affected, instead of allowing an orderly legal process of investigation to continue. As recently as last year, Oklahoma Attorney General Gentner Drummond requested that Commissioner Anthony, open quotes from General Drummond, resist making further inflammatory comments about any unsubstantiated theory of collusion between the utility companies and state employees, close quote. Drummond also requested that Commissioner Anthony retract his misstatements since General Drummond viewed them detrimental to the Attorney General's attempts to recover damages for ratepayers from bad actors of Winter Storm Uri. This commission has the tools it needs to construct and carry out proper, transparent, and legal investigations. I'm truly sorry, we have to consume the public's time on this because of my alcohol dependency in recent years. But the commission should take into account Commissioner Anthony's long record of bitter and vengeful dissatisfaction while charting its pathway forward. Thank you.
And I support the commission's latitude that they have given you to make that statement. I don't find it exactly on the agenda, but I support your having offered it to us. So thank you.
Commissioner Anthony, the way I'm reading, the way you wrote this, it is very wide latitude, the way you have posted this, which is why I allowed that.
Thank you. And yes, I would mention that there's a few people that I know of that have asked to speak, and Mr. Eddy is the first one. And if you could introduce yourself for the commissioners and those listening and get really close to the microphone.
Good afternoon. How's that?
Get close.
Yes, sir. My name is Jess Eddy. I was born and raised here in Oklahoma City. I have some experiences with people performing sexual misconduct that I'd like to share with this board and as a member of the public. I was one of those kids that I was raised in a family of attorneys. I was privileged from the outset. I was student of the month every year, every month, and valedictorian of Midwest City High School. I was an honor student at the University of Oklahoma, and I was asked to be David Boren's teaching assistant while I was there. And I grew up in a strong Democratic family, and we idolized David Boren. I wanted to being an exceptional kid, everyone told me you should be president of the United States. And I wanted to be, and I was full of ambition and hope. And I learned hard experiences about the world there. And that was namely being told by other executives at the university that David Bourne's interest to me was not wholesome, was not because of my potential for leadership, but was because he wanted to have a sexual interaction with me. And I didn't know at the time how to manage that. It happened. He performed sexual misconduct. It was extremely difficult. And I'll touch on that difficulty because it's such a taboo issue in our society. I'm going to tell you what it does to somebody when someone with power sexually abuses someone with much less power. It wrecked my life. It threw me into a depression. I flunked out several times. I developed drinking disorder, and I didn't recover from it until I was 25. It makes a young and ambitious person think, should I have let him do it? Should I have done something different? Was it the way that I acted that made it seem like I might have been open to that? Profoundly painful questions that have afflicted me and continue to afflict me through this day at the age of 34 years old. As I grew into adulthood, I put that in a dark corner that I didn't address, didn't think about. And instead of living in a world of pursuing my hopes, my life became living in a world of how to manage the world as it is. I was frustrated that one of our state's highest officials could exist and work in this place where everybody who worked there knew exactly what was going on. As an adult, as a man, that offended me. Nobody did anything, ever. After the story came out and I spoke my truth, a former police chief in Oklahoma called me and said, I'm glad you did what you did, because in 1972 or 4, I investigated someone who was your age, young, successful, who worked for Governor Bourne, and I investigated a homicide. It turned out to be a suicide, and they had a romantic relationship. And the reason I did what I did and share my truth is because I knew people who he had taken under. I knew that not everybody had survived what I went through, because I almost didn't. I almost didn't. That's the magnitude of the pain. And I'm not here with a pitchfork. I'm not here to destroy another human life. But it's to talk about that we have witnessed the tip of the iceberg, and sexual abuse rarely occurs in a single instance. It is almost always a pattern of behavior, as it was with David Bourne. I had no power, even as the adult. I reported it to police, Norman PD, who to my great delight reported it to the University of Oklahoma police, who reported it to OSBI, who referred it to the Attorney General, who appointed Ryan Whaley Ryan Law Firm. Pat Ryan, former United States Attorney, appointed to the United States Attorney a post nominated by none other than United States Senator David Bourne, partner in Ryan Whaley Ryan, former staffer for David Bourne. What I know about Mr. Hyatt, he has a long life in politics. And what I know is that this board commission is now at a difficult juncture. OU hired in biggest law firm in the country. Nolan Clay will tell you. And he tagged the University of Oklahoma for how much money they spent investigating it. And though I have great distaste for the University of Oklahoma administration and for the Jones Day Law Firm, because they treated me poorly and had not my interest at heart, the investigation was expansive to my assumptions. but I can never be sure because it hasn't been shared with the public. And to this day, it rests between my word and David Boren's in the public eye. I've moved on. I've got a life to live, but it's not fair. He did all this under public office, holding appointed or elected office, being paid by tax dollars. And he hurt a lot of people profoundly. Profoundly. I know some of them. Their lives are never the same. And so to you, Mr. Hyatt, if you truly appreciated the harm you've done, and at least this single instance that the public allegation has made, you would not be in a position to attack anyone else. Humility would afflict you. Nobody, to my knowledge, has asked for anything out of the ordinary. I haven't seen anything. If you and Mr. Anthony had a vendetta, your own mistakes gave him the leverage, but you made those mistakes nonetheless, and you harmed someone else. And I'll tell you, as somebody who's known people in their falls from grace, the only road to redemption is to accept responsibility, to step down and to own it. People make mistakes, and Oklahomans understand that. But to dig your heels in, to attack and lash out at others who you may have policy disagreements with in the midst of this, when someone has actually been harmed, when you know that you've done something that people get fired for. People get drunk at work conferences and touch somebody, or even if they get that drunk, they get fired. So no one's asking for anything extraordinary. And I wouldn't want to quit either. I was an alcoholic. I understand that. I've been through to the other side. There's a path there, man. There's redemption. And I pray you get that, because right now, as a leader in the state of Oklahoma, what it looks like you're willing to do is drag the state, numerous big levels of government through this drama. And that shows me the affliction common with alcoholism is we all think we're the most important person in the world. And I humbly suggest that the work of this commission, the people's interests, are more important than this. And this is something that you should do to set an example. Because when people do what you did, there should be consequences, and merely stepping down from the chairmanship is inadequate. And you and I both know it in your heart of hearts. And, you know, I pray that it happens. And I pray that your interests become ensuring that the individual you harmed or anybody else, that you make amends, that you make sure they're okay, that you make sure the state does what it needs to do. That should be your priority. Because when someone did to me what you are accused of doing, it devastated me.
Mr. Eddie, why don't you take 1 or 2 minutes to wind it up?
Yes, sir. That's all I have, Mr. Anthony. I don't want to be here today. And I hope this matter gets resolved through the appropriate means. And I couldn't tell you what that is, but an independent investigation. I don't, quite frankly, believe in incarcerating people. So I just don't. I think it's an inhumane practice. And so I hope that an investigation that is public and transparent and recommends, you know, what I've recommended here today, if the allegations proceed to be true. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We do appreciate you coming. Ms. Riley, if I may suggest to the representatives of the Attorney General's office, this is not a time to leave, but you're on your own. I think the approach. And one thing that's going to be discussed by me is the letter from the Attorney General's office that is very short, and the chairman gave it to us last week, and it does not say what has been said that it says. And I'd love for you to be able to respond if I'm misreading it. But in the meantime, Ms. Riley, you may speak, and followed by Reverend Wolke.
My name is Christine Riley.
Get real close. Thank you.
Thank you for having me here. I was asked to be here today because here recently have become very evident of politicians acting badly. I'm here on behalf of a friend of mine that can no longer speak for herself. I live in a small city about 130 miles southeast of here. Not everybody knows of Eufaula, but you'll know the names of a few people that are from there. The Silman brothers, J.C. Watts, and the topic of my speech today, Danny Jean Kirby. I knew nothing of Danny Jean Kirby. I did not know that name as a politician. I had since learned about his bad behavior while representative of this state. I knew of the DUIs that the Indians got him off of, the sexual harassment cases that the Indians got him out of. At that point, he had to resign. But with his tail tucked between his legs, he left Tulsa and he came back home to Eufaula. And that is where I encountered Danny Jean Kirby. I am a realtor in this small town of 2,300 people. And my very best friend of over 4 decades was the broker and owner of Paradise Realty. And she had told me one day that we were getting a new associate. And that new associate happened to be Dan. I didn't even know that he had his real estate license, but he wanted to hang it there at our office. So that is when I got to know Dan. He started asking Cheryl, my best friend, out, and she thought it was a conflict because she was the broker and he was the associate, but they ended up dating. And in 2019, they started dating and he moved in with her pretty quickly. The first time I met Dan, shook his hand and spoke with him. No disrespect, but it felt like meeting one of those slimy used car dealers. And I didn't have a good feeling about him in the very beginning. They did date though, and I just started to see odd behaviors. He would actually call Cheryl and ask her if she could go to the liquor store and buy alcohol and put it in a water bottle and bring it to him at work. And I was thinking that's just not normal. As the years went by, because they ended up dating over 2 years, I started to back away. It was very hard to be around him. And once I found out that he had been a politician, well, sometimes the used car salesman politician sort of runs in the same area at times. I didn't have as much communication with Cheryl any longer, and it was obvious that Dan was really alienating her away from friends and family, and it was more of him bringing his friends in. Well, July 22nd, 24th of 2022, Danny insisted on riding his motorcycle with Cheryl on the back, with two friends following a motorcycle, to a marina and bar in our state park called Fountainhead. I know that he wanted to go there because I knew that he was seeing the bartender without Cheryl knowing. And when they got there, of course, still in 2022, Dan would still introduce himself as State Representative Dan Kirby. And as they were there for a while and he started taking shots, my friend Cheryl reached over to the girl that was on the other motorcycle and said, "We should not have ridden these bikes here." And she said, "Can you get your boyfriend to tell Dan that we're ready to go?" So they load up and they're leaving the marina parking lot. And Dan and Cheryl are on the front, the bike that leaves first. And as they're leaving the parking lot, Dan takes the left turn very wide, misses the asphalt altogether, and winds up in the ditch under the trees. And as a normal person would do, would come to a stop, but I guess not when you're impaired, because he kept traveling and then tried to bring the bike back on the asphalt. And when he did, they wrecked. And my 96-year-old friend of 40 plus years flew 15 feet off the back of the bike and landed face down in the asphalt. Instead of Dan running over to check on her as she was dying on the asphalt, he gets out his phone, not to call 911. But his first phone call was to his daughter to ask her to hurry up and get there before any of the authorities got there so that she could take the saddlebags off of his motorcycle. The second phone call he made, interesting enough, was to a state trooper who was not on call that night that I happen to be very good friends with. Called the trooper and asked the trooper, or let him know that he was just in a motorcycle accident and wanted to know that his reputation was probably going to take a hit. And if he could speak his name through his other trooper friends in case all of this went sideways in the future. Only a narcissistic politician would come up with something like that. When we went to court for Dan Kirby's involuntary manslaughter, I found out so many interesting things. Dan Kirby didn't have one system in his illegal system, substance in his system, not two, not three, not four, but 9. From oxycodone to pot to alcohol, trazodone, and many others. Politicians behaving badly is a tale as old as time. Do I think for one second, back in 2015, 16, 17, when he got into trouble while he was state representative, if something would have been done then and he would have been reprimanded, would my friend still be here? I can't really play that guessing game because nothing's going to bring my friend back. Something needs to change. Every blow Joe or blow Jolene in this state has to be held accountable for driving drunk or acting badly. That is not the case with most politicians. There seems to be a free ride there more often than not. It is a real hit on the state seal that they promised to uphold. And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to see it on the TV, to hear about it. I know it doesn't just happen in Oklahoma. It happens everywhere, but I just happen to live in Oklahoma. My friend, his mother is still alive. She has a brother, sister, 4 children, and 13 grandchildren. The last one she did not get to meet because of a politician acting badly and had no accountability until he killed her. 40 months in federal prison, 41 months in federal prison is a slap on the wrist. He'll be getting out. Now, he professed at sentencing that he had stopped drinking, stopped doing drugs, and had to give up his marijuana card. But then again, too, he was on probation for that 1.5 years, so that was kind of a given, right? Did he learn his lesson? I don't know. But what I do know is that things need to change. There has to be accountability for elected politicians. If we have to sit and listen to what seems like 2 years of ads and the promises that these politicians are willing to make and all the changes they're going to do. Not all politicians are bad, but there's a big old handful of them that are, that getting these offices for one reason, and no pun intended, but they all become drunk with power. And they think that they are above the law. And you know what? Sometimes they are. And it is not right. I'm just a voter. I'm just a voter. We don't have any rights. We can't vote to put a politician in jail. But by golly, we can vote to put one at the Capitol or anywhere else. It's not right. In closing, Maya Angelou has a quote. If someone shows you their true self, believe them the first time. Thank you.
Reverend Walke, and please introduce yourself and get very close to the microphone.
Hello, commissioners. I am Reverend Dr. Lori Walke. I am a faith leader with Voices Organized in Civic Engagement, and I am a lifelong Oklahoman. I come today to repeat the call for Commissioner Hyatt to resign. Commissioner Hyatt, you are on record as saying it would be a detriment for you to step aside from your responsibility to balance the interests of ratepayers to those of the utilities. And it is true that it would be a detriment for you, for your ego, and for your pride and for your personal power that you have accumulated over your many years in public office. But for you to not step aside as a corporation commissioner would be a detriment to the good and fair-minded people of Oklahoma. For you to continue in this role is a detriment to the public's trust in the commission's ability to be unbiased, to balance without prejudice the interests of ratepayers to those of the utilities. If you do not resign, every decision that you make will be overshadowed by the legitimate concern over your motivation. Are you trying to keep someone quiet or smooth over the relationship with a utility whose employee has endured inappropriate behavior at your hand? Will citizens need to ask if drunkenness or moral turpitude are impacting the decisions of the commission every single time there is an opportunity for public comment? For you to continue in this commission is a detriment to the good name of this state. Your behavior was, and your avoidance of accountability now is dishonorable. And Oklahomans deserve to be represented by reputable commissioners who we can trust will act in a manner befitting of the office you hold. For you to continue on this commission would be a detriment to assault survivors who are all too familiar with the line, "Just give me another chance," and who see someone continuing in power who has been accused by multiple witnesses of assault. As a person who is family to an alcoholic, this is deeply personal to me. I have seen firsthand how stress from work and home can make recovery all the more difficult, and how reducing pressure points can be an important factor in the sobriety journey. And let me tell you, we are really rooting for you. The problem is the commission faces a heavy workload that includes numerous rate cases with a tremendous potential impact on ratepayers. And this will not change, and it will impact your journey to sobriety. For you to step down from the Corporation Commission would be a powerful example of true repentance and repair, opening the way for someone else who can be trusted to make decisions on behalf of the people of Oklahoma. Redemption begins with resignation. It is the honorable thing to do, and perhaps the only way to build back trust so that you might lead in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Spratling, please introduce yourself and your occupation.
Thank you, Chairman David and Commissioner Anthony, for this opportunity to address the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. My name is Cameron Spradling, and the reason I am here is to offer my insight as an attorney who specializes in this unique practice of law. I represent sexual abuse victims and survivors.
Get a little closer to the microphone.
I am the lead attorney on the 5 largest settlement judgments against Oklahoma school districts. In chronological order, you know them as the Perry, the Kingfisher, the Wawoka, the Salina, and the Ninnekah. I'm also currently one of the attorneys representing a dozen of Oklahoma's most vulnerable who were cruelly abused at the Greer Center. And for each of those cases, the media would attach an additional moniker to those names of scandal, sex scandal, or abuse scandal. For the most part, those cases share a common pattern. There was previous notice of the conduct by the abuser or predator. There was an internal investigation conducted either by the administration, the Board of Education, or school attorneys. There was a failure to make the results of that investigation fully known to the public. And there was a decision not to report the conduct to outside law enforcement or utilize an independent investigative entity with no connection or control by the school district. You know, frequently I'm asked after a case is over, why didn't the school district just simply fully report all the events and just allow a third-party entity to come in and fully investigate the situation and thereby just wash their hands of the matter and let the chips fall where they may? And sadly, in these cases, after we go through discovery and acquire the documents, it's often because those in power are afraid. That those in power are afraid that if they allow a third-party investigative entity to come within their walls and allow them free rein, that the investigation will uncover other wrongdoings, such as their own financial malfeasance, such as embezzlement, or the acceptance of bribes for contracts. In other words, the revelations of sneaky, underhanded dealing that the public and taxpayers are unaware, and the cover-ups are about money. The scandal is not that the vampire got inside the school. We all recognize that there are vampires who walk amongst us. The scandal is that those in power who had a moral, ethical, and legal duty to rid themselves of the vampire, instead, for their own protection, protected, covered up, and enabled the vampire. The scandal is that those in power became the keepers of the vampire, because no vampire can remain hidden without a keeper or keepers. And Chairman David and Commissioner Anthony, the Oklahoma Corporation Commission stands at the precipice of a scandal. And if decisive action is not taken, your legacy will be that you are a part of what will be known as the Oklahoma Corporation Commission scandal. Now, there's no need to recite the events that brought us here today. I have never met either of you. Neither have I had any communications by email, correspondence, or phone. I am present because I care. And I especially care about you, Chairman David, because I feel that you are stuck in the fulcrum of this decision and this matter, that you've been foisted in that position, and I feel the burden that you feel. I read and listened to each media story because for me, it was a familiar and predictable pattern that I've experienced in all my other lawsuits. There was denial, there was equivocation, there was revelation, there was deflection, there was rationalization, there was delay in hopes to fade the media heat. And then today I witnessed what I've seen so many times before in Mr. Hyatt's statement. And his litany of past incidents involving Mr. Anthony is also the very type of diversion that I'm accustomed to and is irrelevant to this investigation and the wrongdoing that's happened. And there is common sense about this. Anybody who's ever known a family member or a loved one or a friend who goes through a 12-step program knows that they do not communicate the way Mr. Hyatt communicated today. As Mr. Eddy said, there was no humility in that remark. I don't know if he wrote that himself or someone prepared it for him, but that was totally inappropriate and indicates he is not well. This matter has already began in an inexorable path. The truth will come out. The only question is the amount of damage that will befall the Oklahoma Corporation Commission and the state of Oklahoma. Now, there is a solution. In my unique field of practice, I've studied the independent investigations conducted in the Baylor University sexual assault scandal, the USA gymnastics sex abuse scandal, and the Penn State child sex abuse scandal. I've looked at what has worked and what has failed. Your only goal is to salvage the reputation of the Oklahoma Corporation Commission and the state of Oklahoma. That which has worked to salvage the reputation of these institutions was an investigation devoid of interference by, in this case, anyone in the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. A completely transparent investigation which allows the investigative entity to have free rein to make a determination as to why what was known by so many was covered up and why. To allow the investigators to go where the truth takes them, no matter the consequences. In addition, for the public's sake, the investigation must be conducted by qualified individuals who are above reproach. I have no criticisms either about the Riggs Abney firm. A matter of fact, I offer my services to them as a consultant, pro bono, free of charge. I offer my private investigators who are retired FBI agents to assist. But you will be getting to the bottom of this. Now, I've directed my comments to Chairman David and Commissioner Anthony, but I now direct my closing comments to you, Mr. Hyatt. Mr. Hyatt, the number one defense mechanism of a predator is denial. The number one defense mechanism of a habitual drunkard is denial. You are not indispensable. Your value to the Oklahoma Corporation Commission was forfeited long ago. You seem to be totally unaware that you've exposed the state of Oklahoma to a federal civil rights case with what you did in Minnesota. Because at that moment, you were acting under color of state law. You were a representative of the state of Oklahoma. Your excuses is not common sense. I deal with these matters. In the last 6 months, I've dealt with a matter with a banker who said he was drunk and forgot that he slid into the bed of his daughter's overnight guest, 12-year-old girl, and didn't know what he did. And he's facing criminal charges, and the bank dismissed him as a bank president. Immediately. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes your story. The alcohol removes your inhibitions, but it doesn't explain why you would touch another man's groin. Just as it didn't explain that man getting in bed with a 12-year-old girl. These are the excuses of a predator. And it doesn't make sense to the public. And you don't see that. You don't even see how you exposed yourself today by your statement. I'm a firm believer in the First Amendment. I believe in the concept of the news media as a fourth branch of government and the media's responsibility to inform the public to ensure our democracy. You, sir, are now in the crucible. And upon each successive media story, there will be witnesses and past victims who are emboldened to come forward to both investigators and the media. And Mr. Hyatt, your political career is going to suffer a death by 1,000 cuts. This I know from all the cases I have done. You hold the solution in your grasp. And I implore you to resign. Save yourself and the state of Oklahoma this continued pain. There is victory through surrender. Resign. Get serious treatment. Get inpatient, get outpatient treatment. Take care of yourself, get well. Thank you for all your time and attention, everyone.
Any questions for the gentleman? Gary, as Secretary of the agency, an officer, I want you to do me a favor. Give this piece of paper to the Attorney General's office. Yeah. The responsibility that this agency has right now dealing with these matters can be as serious as I can imagine. But the first thing I want to do is to thank the four people who have come forward to speak to us. I wouldn't have recognized any of you in the room. I don't think I've met any of you previously. I will comment on a couple of things. Prior to walking in this room, I had not received this piece of paper that comes as agenda item number 8, which was the one on the status update of a non-criminal complaint investigation. And I understood when I came in the room that a member of my staff had just received it on his email attachment. Had either of the other two commissioners received this outline that mentions the Rick Zabney law firm and the nature of the investigation?
I received it just before this meeting.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
I had not received it and still have not received it.
Okay. And I already said, David Lee is an outstanding attorney. He worked for, I think, 3 or 4 different attorneys general. He's deceased now. He finished his career with the Rick Zabney firm. I think he has done great service. And Melvin Hall is just an outstanding individual. And I already disclosed that I think both of them have represented me in the past. Now, when you're looking for an independent investigation, I don't know how that works. Randy, if you don't mind, Randy Reith, our Director of Administration, I got maybe a couple of questions for you. Am I correct in my recollection that the Rick Zabney firm had represented you by name in a commission-related lawsuit previously? That's kind of a yes or no answer.
Brandy Reith, Director of Administration. They did represent me in my capacity as Director of Public Utility Division, a personnel matter,
and
along with the rest of the agency.
Did a good job. I think they did a good job. Did you?
Of course, yes.
Of course, and thank you. Now, I don't know the right terminology. If this agency moves forward with this firm, are you willing to waive any right of, I don't know if the word's privilege, or that due to this previous engagement? I mean, they've been your attorney previously. Are you willing to say that has no effect, any obligation that you have to be professionally is to be set aside? You see what I'm trying to say?
They actually have no obligation to me professionally because they were representing me in capacity as Director of the division in a personal matter related to a supervisor in the division. So there would be nothing for me to waive, and if there were, I would be happy to do so.
Well, thank you. I'm doing the best I can to try and deal with those issues. Now, we have before us an incidence. That's the word that I think a different commissioner used, and others too, in Minneapolis, Minnesota in June of 2024, just a couple of months ago. And that kind of brought all this to our attention. But apparently there's been other episodes or instances prior to this. And in the newspaper, there was some mention of Broadway 10 having a reception for a new law firm. My question is, prior to this Minnesota event at a regulatory conference, had you known of any report or had you heard any word about drunkenness by a commissioner?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And how far back does that go? When did you started hearing maybe the first
First of all,
report?
Commissioner, I want to note my objection because I think under Title VII, Section 3, that your questioning of me would lend me to disclose things from employees that were given to me in confidence under confidential discussions.
Good.
And so I want to be very careful
don't-
with that,
yes,
but I will
please
answer your
do.
question.
Yeah,
At the one
I
time
just
this,
asked when.
I know, but the when leads to a lot of things. And there's already witnesses that have come forward that are afraid, as was mentioned by the gentleman that came today. My role as the administrator is to ensure that proper investigative bodies look into this, which is what I've tried to do every time this has come up. And so what I'm not,
We
no,
might get into that.
we
but
might get
I'm
it, but
asking-
Commissioner,
I'm just asking you, has this circumstance got a history?
I have had one prior report from an employee reporting possible intoxication. There was nothing done officially. They did not want to go on the record. They did not want to make a statement. They simply asked that I would speak to the commissioner and tell them they were concerned and seek that he get help.
Thank you. I appreciate nothing further.
Absolutely.
Now, on this one-page piece of paper, I think it's a joke. I didn't say the re-examining firm was a joke. Look at what it says here. It's talking about the scope, to conduct an independent investigation. Well, we're all for that, of commissioner misconduct impacting commission employees or others who do business with the commission. That's extremely limited. If we're going to do an investigation, I don't think you ought to tie their hands. I don't think you ought to limit them. I don't think you ought to put blindfolds on them. Let the investigator, we've got a situation here, find out all about it. If there's been somebody in a position of authority or outside who has influenced the circumstance, let them ask about that. Maybe the other commissioners will have a question for you. I don't. I'm
I'll
trying
wait
to
to speak.
speak now.
That's fine, Commissioner.
Okay. Have a seat.
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you. I'm not the best speaker. My voice shakes. I do the best I can. Okay. I think this is ridiculous. The scope. Now, I have an agenda item that has 12 numbered features, conditions, objectives, responsibilities, and that's what I favor. It's totally open. It's got the transparency we're talking about. I think an expression has been used. If you're trying to do that, and I think the last speaker, the attorney that's done this kind of work, could cover this better than I can. If you're going to have an independent investigation, it's like you don't have in a football game, one team get to pick the referee. It's not a good one to start. I do object to the way this, whatever circumstance or status we have on how it's been handled so far. I have been told nothing, zero, in the way of a report from whoever's putting this investigation together until I get this piece of paper and walk in the room. I think there has been communication to other commissioner offices. And I'll just read part of what I had already put out here. It says, my office was not provided any information about this so-called investigation other than what was said publicly in this courtroom last week, zero. Now, I was given this one piece of paper that comes from the Attorney General's office, and I'll get to that in 1 second. But I remember something very important that was said in this courtroom on July 31st. Commissioner Kim David looked at Director Brandy Reith and said, and I'm quoting, I feel it may be prudent for us to do an independent investigation. By the way, I heard a different term used here, personnel investigation. No. I don't want somebody who's going to just cooperate with personnel investigation, a full investigation. I'm still on the quote here, excuse me. That way, it's not this is Kim David speaking. That way, it's not this agency that's doing an investigation. It's not you, Director Reith, whose job depends on the commissioner who's doing this. So it surprises me how we got to this point of going forward and getting with the Riggs Abney firm. Now, on this letter to from the Attorney General's office, I understood probably from the discussion last week that the Attorney General first said, we're not going to do the investigation, the independent full investigation. But they give this, and it's got one sentence. It says, Commissioner, you are authorized to state that the Office of the Attorney General stands ready to accept any complaint of criminal wrongdoing and will take appropriate action, period. Okay, that doesn't say they're going to do an investigation. I'm reading this, and the representatives entitled to school me or correct me. This says if we have a complaint on a silver platter that somebody like some of these news reporters have come forward with, and you present it to us, then maybe we'll do the appropriate thing. That's a whole lot different than saying we're going to take initiative, we're going to be proactive, we're going to conduct an investigation. And then this is being misrepresented to say, well, the Attorney General's office is going to handle the criminal investigation. That's not what this piece of paper says. Now, on the other side, I've got from earlier in this meeting, agenda item number 8, which, by the way, in the 4 items I presented, I repeated it twice just to make sure that I was within the notice and of what's required to give. And this one sentence says that we're going to update on hiring an independent investigator. Boy, we're all for that, to handle non-criminal complaints. Well, there's 2 problems with that. First of all, the word complaint has significance. It has legal significance. A little rumor in the newspaper, that's not a complaint. An allegation that someone throws out there, that's not a complaint. But a complaint could be like a formal lawsuit filed or a formal filing in the state employment or HR process. So this says, oh, we've got a non-criminal complaints that are the subject matter in the scope. That's ridiculous. If we're going to take this matter seriously, we're in a crisis mode. And I want to say this. I think one of the great responsibilities we have is especially to all employees of this agency, particularly the female employees of this agency. And I read in the paper where 2 of them have been involved or subjected to an unfortunate circumstance. We have an obligation to protect those people. And some of the speakers said it better than I. And I'll say this. I don't think I've said this in 35 years. I think all the time of when I became a 2nd lieutenant in the United States Army during the Vietnam War, when some of the buddies that I served with didn't come back. And that oath of office said to support and defend the Constitution. And when you get sworn in, as all 3 of us have, to hold office as a corporation commissioner, usually on the south sides of the Capitol step by a Supreme Court justice, we say we will support, obey, and defend the Constitution. And the Constitution, thanks to those that put it together in 1907, has a lot of specifics for the corporation commissioners, like to correct abuses. Those are exact words. And to have fair, just, and reasonable determination of rates and charges and things like that. Okay, the number one thing on my mind right now is that oath of office. And it goes like this: the credibility, the integrity, the legitimacy of this commission and these meetings and this courtroom is the essence of it. And how can you have a judge, including me, or a commissioner, whatever you want to call us, looking at one of these attorneys and knowing that one of us has sexually assaulted a lawyer representing that firm? And this isn't hypothetical. Last week and the week before, we had one of those companies, and I estimated last week at $500 million issue 2 weeks ago, and another $500 million. How can we have a fair determination with integrity and honesty when that's happened? And I think the only solution is to clean house. All right, I'm going to read one page, and then you can take it from there. Well, I do have a motion posted as the last item on the agenda. Okay, I think the comments today, and I'm talking about the 4 people that were brave enough and kind enough to show up and to participate. I'm talking about you. I think the comments from today's presenters were powerful and the takeaways were clear. Crimes and misconduct are still crimes and misconduct, even if the victims are too scared or intimidated to report them. If those crimes and misconduct are not investigated, especially when abuse of power is involved, the other's silence and inaction only enables the abuser, leading to more and worse crimes and misconduct. It has also been made clear that when the alleged perpetrator is a person with significant power and authority, like an elected official who cannot be disciplined or fired, only a professionally led independent investigation whose results are made public can overcome the power differential between the abuser and the victim and allow for true accountability. Shamefully, it appears the OCC, the Oklahoma Corporation Commission, is continuing down the path of organized obstruction and cover-up instead of an honest, legitimate, independent investigation. To let the commissioners or employees of this agency be involved with choosing the investigators is like letting one team hire the referee. The league chooses the referee. In this case, that should be unconflicted leaders of the law enforcement community, like the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, or the district attorney. The Corporation Commission does not need this investigation to determine how much Commissioner Hyatt drank, with whom, how many people he groped, or to whom he exposed himself, or where he passed out. The OCC needs this investigation to ascertain the impact of the commissioner misconduct on the credibility and legitimacy of this agency, its employees, the conduct of its business, and the integrity of its operations that have a multi-billion-dollar impact on this state every single year. To the extent every incident of commissioner misconduct has its own consequences, then we need to know the details of each one. That said, they are individual pieces of a larger puzzle that must be assembled to be solved. If this agency, this last paragraph, if this agency attempts to limit this investigation to a couple of instances that were leaked to the newspaper and does not approach the investigation holistically, the Corporation Commission will continue to be a breeding ground of misconduct, abuse of power, and public corruption that advantages the few and victimizes the many. As we have learned too well in recent years, the consequences of that can be long-lasting and very expensive for everyday Oklahomans. Now, the motion that is set forth on the last page of the agenda calls for a vote to authorize a full and thorough, open, transparent, independent investigation and adopt the proposed criteria, obligations, and requirements stated above, the 1 through 12. And I vote aye, Mr. Secretary, on that vote that's called for there. And it does say that it's subject to amendment. So if of those 12 items, if there's one that is off base, if somebody would tell me about it, I'd be glad to have that as a print amendment and withdraw it. But to ask for things like credibility, legitimacy, integrity, it talks about who had the knowledge of alleged commissioner misconduct. That's number 5. I already touched on it. This agency has people that have known about this, as you indicated. And I'm looking at some of the people who gave comment. There is a history. I sat by a member of the state legislature who's termed out, a former member, I guess you'd say, and he said, Anthony, you're the only one that doesn't know about the history of this. So there are people in this agency in leadership that know that things have happened in the past. And yes, like was explained by a qualified spokesman, they found out that it's tough when a commissioner or a top administrator or a boss is somebody you have to deal with. Okay, so number 5 says we want to know who had any knowledge of alleged commissioner misconduct. When they had it, did they report it? Because if they sit on it, then we have what spokesman said is recurrence and greater liability. Thank you for your patience in listening.
Commissioner Anthony, the only concern I truly have is when I read your post and what the investigators agreed to do, and this is in Melvin Hall's with the Riggs Abney firm. Seems like a fully capable individual to do an independent investigation. My concern moving forward is that we don't do anything that impedes that investigation, nor do we try to intimidate any of the possible witnesses of this commission that might be willing to come forward to make a comment. Some of the parameters that you put forward out there, it seems like you want to go after some of the employees, which would mean none of them would ever come forward. I want to assure everyone that might be willing to come forward and on the scope of this, where it says that he agrees to conduct the investigation, an independent investigation of commissioner misconduct, which means any commissioner impacting the commission, the employees or others who do business with the commission. The others who do business with the commission pretty much wide opens anything that he can find that trail and go down that trail. I don't believe there have been any strings attached to what he's investigating. He just has to have witnesses willing to come forward. I want to be able to give assurances to anyone who wants to come forward and make a statement to Mr. Hall that, especially if they're employees or they do business with the commission, that their identity will be held confidential. And if they have proof of criminal wrongdoing, that complaint will be forwarded from Mr. Hall to the AG's office. And I would like, for Mr. Snodgrass, if he feels confident or it feels like it's appropriate to comment on what the AG sent to us in an email. When I spoke to his chief of staff last week, it was simply that if a criminal complaint comes forward, they will take it seriously and investigate it. They have to have a criminal complaint moving forward. Am I wrong in that, Mr. Snodgrass? Can you please speak to that?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Chase Snodgrass, Deputy Attorney General for the Oklahoma Attorney General's Office. Apologies, Commissioner Anthony, for trying to leave earlier. As you can imagine, as Deputy Attorney General, I have many pressing obligations, and so I apologize for moving on to other business.
I should have given you a heads up. Then I thought that these things would come up. Thank you for changing your schedule.
Commissioner David, I am not a criminal attorney. I deal with matters before the Corporation Commission. I have read the same email that Commissioner Anthony was referring to earlier, which simply states that you are authorized to state that the Office of the Attorney General stands ready to accept any complaint of criminal wrongdoing and will take appropriate action. Reports may be made to Agent Dauphinus via phone number 405-501-9687 or by email to gerard.dauphinus@oag.ok.gov. My understanding of this email is that should a victim or somebody with knowledge of criminal wrongdoing report such actions or criminal wrongdoing to the Attorney General's office, that we will take appropriate action based on that knowledge. As far as anything beyond that, I'm not aware of those details.
Would it hurt anything if the contract with Riggs Abney said that they could look at any form of wrongdoing? You know, if they smart law firm, got a lot of former attorney generals too. Why don't you not limit it? They can look. If they say, oh my gosh, here's something that looks like it happened, it's criminal, they can take it to you. I think your statement is good. But I think it's being mischaracterized that, oh, Attorney General is going to do all the criminal investigation. No, they're going to deal with it when they get a complaint. It's okay with me. But does it interfere with anything to just say, Riggs Abney, you look at any wrongdoing, and if it goes to this category over there, then you go take it to the Attorney General.
I believe that is the case. So Randy, if you'd like to come up. Thank you, Mr. Snodgrass. I appreciate your comments. Brandy, you've had the conversations with the investigator on the parameters of that. And I have asked you about this because my concern was that not only do we protect anyone who wants to come forward, that we feel like they can be kept, that everything they say can be kept confidential to a certain point. It definitely, they're who they are. So, but I was also concerned that if someone came forward with a criminal complaint or possible criminal complaint, that would be pushed forward to the Attorney General's office. So can you speak to that in your conversations with this firm?
That is how the statement of work was set up between General Counsel and the contracted investigator. It's one of the parameters that any criminal allegations would be immediately referred to the Attorney General's office. What we cannot do is expend Corporation Commission resources to proactively do a criminal investigation because that's not under our authority. And as even the posting today cited, there's already been public comments about misuse of state funds if we're trying to do that. It is very particular that this was done as a personnel action because that's our authority to investigate. That's why we went through CSD. That's why we dealt with ethics, is that's our authority to investigate and entering into a contract of this nature on behalf of our employees to give them a forum. As we stated on the record in previous meetings, I just want to be clear, we reached out to all the outside entities to make sure they were aware to see if they're going to investigate. Unfortunately, we cannot force or require anyone to investigate. We can just do what's within our authority, which is this personnel investigation, including a scope of work. If criminal allegations arise, it's a contract provision. They will be handed to the Attorney General's office. They do not go through us. The commissioners, me, General Counsel, once the contract is signed, it's an independent. So if they see these 12 parameters and they think they're good things to do, they have the authority to do that. If the gentleman that spoke today reaches out to them pro bono and wants to assist, they can do that. There's no state resources being expended under that.
Has a contract been signed?
A statement of work is in process and the Attorney General has approved that scope of work with the language that they would be referred directly to the Attorney General.
Has the contract with the Corporation Commission and Riggs Abney been signed?
I would have to ask General Counsel.
I hope not. By the way, do you think the commissioners could see it?
The commissioners will get a copy when it's executed, yes.
I want one before it's executed, because if it's limited like this, I want to put it on the agenda to vote against it.
Commissioner, we're not going to delay this investigation. This topic has come up. The commissioners did not move to do an investigation, so I'm doing this under my authority as the appointing authority with the duties you all have vested in me to do employee investigations. If you want this additional investigation, you can still post and do that. That would need to be handled separate from an employee EEOC type investigation. I fully support it if everybody wants to do that, but my responsibility and duty as the appointing authority is the employee personnel investigation, which is what we're doing. And I don't like the representation to the public that I have unilateral authority to launch a criminal investigation and hire criminal investigators. I do not have that authority. And I have not been shown yet where the commission has that authority to do that. That's why we reached out to the Attorney General and other entities that have that authority to do such investigations.
I think the wording in the Constitution uses words like examine and inquire and whatever they are. And I don't see that. We can ask questions. We can review the books and records of the regulated companies in particular, one of whom has an attorney that got assaulted. I think we have the authority to look into that, even though that's a criminal thing. But I'm not here to have a debating society with you at this time. I will repeat that this is a quote from Commissioner Kim David. She said, that way it's not this agency that's doing an investigation. It's not you, Director Reith, whose job depends on the commissioners who's doing this. I'm just surprised, I'll just use that word, that you would go ahead and even come close to finalizing a contract when in the commissioner meeting that was said. Anyway, let's,
Commissioner Anthony,
before it
let me
gets
clarify
signed,
that
I'd
since
like
you were
to see
using
it.
my words.
Yes.
My words are that he doesn't conduct the investigation. I believe by hiring this independent firm, a very reputable independent firm that Mr. Reith has taken himself out of the investigation part and will be turning it over to an investigator to take wherever he feels necessary to take it. The scope of whether it's not just the employees, but this investigator also has the ability to conduct the investigation with those who do business with the commission. Then I believe that, you know, my requirements are being met, that this is an independent investigation that is not someone who works for this agency or whose job is dependent upon this agency.
Okay. I think we ought to see the contract. And if it's, I think they ought to be able to look at anything, personnel, criminal, civil, any form of wrongdoing. Let the investigator look at anything. And then what they do with it, then that might be a different question, as I think you just indicated. And we already discussed, if it looks like a criminal deal, you might go this way. But the way this is written, and I don't know, this is this one-page summary. It's not the contract. I want to know what the scope of the contract is. What's the scope of the investigation? And it ought to look at if there's a cover-up. If somebody said, I was intimidated, my boss said, don't do that. My boss, then I think we ought to be able to look at that. All right. Can you, there is a proposed contract. There, we have some wording for this engagement.
I believe what you received, I wasn't copied on that or haven't seen what you received, Commissioner, but I believe that probably is the statement of work, which is what would define the work to be conducted. that it is a very limited sentence to give broad latitude to the investigators, that they're able to look into any.
That's not what, okay. If there's a contract, if there's a statement of work, whatever it is, before it gets signed and finalized, I want to see it. I'm a state officer of this commission. I'm asking you to let me see it. And I think that the commissioners ought to have some kind of vote to go forward. And hey, this thing that we only have meetings once a week, we used to have meetings every business day of the year. So if we need to come back in 2 days, let's do it. Anyway, I hope I'm clear. I think it's irresponsible that we would engage in something that is so critical to the integrity and legitimacy of all these cases going on, that somebody would suggest that we don't get to see it.
Again, Commissioner, this is done under my authority. We sign contracts like this regularly for investigations. This is being done in my capacity as a point of authority. This is not to supplant or replace any official investigation by law enforcement, Attorney General, OSBI, U.S. Attorney. They do not need our authorization or assistance in those matters. This is being done pursuant to statutory authority for EEO type investigations through CSD collaboration. This is not an investigation
You
of
think
criminal.
what you just said, EEOC use personnel investigation. You think this is limited to personnel and EEOC?
That's the authority under which we're doing this contract, and it is open for them to talk to anyone who comes forward. And if someone comes forward with criminal allegations, it'll be referred to the
Take more
AG.
time. If the other commissioners have questions for you, so yeah, I'm telling you right now, I want to see that contract or proposed wording that especially tells what the scope of services is. I'm
And
making that request.
And Commissioner Anthony, perhaps you would feel better if you met with the investigator to discuss your concerns?
That'd be wonderful. I think the
Maybe
whole
that
agency has.
that would be proper. I'm sure the investigator would be fine with that.
Absolutely. Commissioners would be an employee of the agency and allowed to speak and a stakeholder.
But in the meantime.
And then I would appreciate it if after that if you were comfortable with this moving forward, I would like this investigation to be able to start as soon as possible. So perhaps we could set that meeting up pretty quickly.
I'll have general counsels doing the communication with the investigator.
In the meantime, my request stands. You're welcome to check with the general counsel. If the general counsel says, oh, there's Commissioner Anthony, there's something wrong with you having access to this contractor engagement, then I want to hear what she's got to say too.
There's
I'm
never
trying
been
to
a
do
concern
my
with you having a copy of the contract, Commissioner. I already stated that was going to be sent to the commissioners. This is the first time there's been a request to see a
before
contract
it
will
gets
be.
signed.
Like I said, this is the first time you've broached that, and I said I would check with general counsel. I have no problem sending you the contract or whatever's being proposed to be signed. That is no problem.
Thank you. I have cast my vote on my motion.
I'm not planning on taking a vote on that motion until
I
it's
didn't mean
really
to call it a motion.
decided on. Oh, I thought you did
I-
take a vote on that or ask for a vote on an motion. So are we through agenda item 10, 11, and 12? Did it? 10, let's see, 10, 11, and 12. Did we
Yes.
address all of your agenda items?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any new business before us? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.